Alright, well somehow we've made it this far without covering this topic, but better further down the line than not at all, as the saying goes. Here are 6 farmable Guild War offenses, and a couple that are less farmable, but I find they're reasonable upgrades, so I'm gonna include them because I can do whatever I want. This is my video. But what is farmable? In order to be considered for this list, the monsters either need to be summonable 3 stars, fusible, or directly available through things like the Ancient Coin Shop, the Guild Magic Shop in pieces, or if they were previously available in a Hall of Heroes. And one last thing before we get started. In general, unless you're going for something like a turn 1 cleave or snipe comp, then generally speaking you should probably be ruining your monsters to be a little bit tankier. Cool? Cool. Our first team is Tractor, Windy, and Lulu. This team is excellent for countering things with, well, defense break. Go figure. Because 2 of its members are resistant to defense break in Windy and Tractor, and Lulu's just there to clean up whatever's left. Oh, and let's not forget that things like Carcano are going to be trying to focus your Windy because it's the opposing element, and you're just not going to outdamage the tankiness of Windy. Our next team is a classic in Bulldozer, Copper, and Randy, or I guess it also could be Megan, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to say Randy. As long as you're on Will, you actually don't necessarily need to use Randy's speed lead for this one. You can go with Bulldozer's bonus defense lead instead. Now, Randy brings something kind of unique in that his 3rd skill will give a defense buff and a crit rate buff. As a reminder, crit rate buffs will boost everyone's crit rate by 30%. Now that's 30% that you could be focusing on other stats now that you have that buff available. Also, the defense buff is of the utmost importance because it's also the primary contributor for your damage. If you opt for Megan instead, just make sure that she's fast enough to start, do the attack bar boost, and apply an attack and defense buff, though the defense buff is by far the most important part. Our 3rd team is going to be Harmonia, Elucia, and Aegir, but Aegir in this case is a placeholder for whatever tank is the opposing element of the enemy's DPS unit. So in this case, if you happen to see a comp that's like a Kamoon, a Vigor, and a Triana, you bring this, the Kamoon and the Vigor will focus down your super tanky and hopefully resistant Harmonia, and then Elucia provides the control and heals so that you'll eventually outvalue your opponents. Number 4 is Harmonia, Dark Homunculus, and 2A Sath. This is the farmable version of Rika, Gani, and Wusa, and it's important to note that Harmonia can actually beat any unit that gives immunity, but Harmonia has a heal, a cleanse, and a guild leader skill. What's important for this offense to work is actually before you get into a game. You don't want to bring this against a super fast turn 1 cleave comp with Galleon, the light blade dancer, you know, stuff akin to that. What you'd rather do is bring this against defenses that only have 1 cleanse or no cleanse at all. If the enemy goes and doesn't put immunity, then you can reset them with the Dark Homunculus, and then just apply a ton of dots. Take this against slower defenses, and it should work just fine. Number 5 is going to be Gemini, 2A Kali, and 2A Raok, and that last slot is just supposed to be AoE damage. And I know that Raok is not traditionally thought of as AoE damage, but because of his passive, whenever he knocks an enemy, he's going to get an additional turn, which could further his KD ratio. Though in that slot instead could be the Water Elven Ranger, a Water Homunculus, a Bernadotte, or even a Kaki if you happen to have one. Gemini was available as a Hall of Heroes. He has a speed lead, an AoE defense break that's pretty reliable, and a strip as long as he has fewer buffs on him than the enemy. So the idea there is that you ruin him fast, he opens up the enemy team, and then your AoE damage is right there to capitalize on the defense break. Our final farmable team is actually, I always trip on that. Our final farmable team is Fran, Lauren, and Theomars. And the idea here is pretty simple. Fran puts up an attack buff, Lauren applies a defense break, and then Theomars is there to just... Theomars can be Aegir, or it could even be a Chilling, and what's great about Chilling is that he doesn't even necessarily need to be on crit damage. Because of additional damage from artifacts benefiting multi-hits quite well, he'll do just fine without a crit damage slot 4. Okay, these last 2 teams are not farmable, but I find them to be reasonable enough because you might encounter them somewhere down the line. The first one is Garo, 2A Raok, and Vertihile. The idea here is that Garo provides a fire speed lead, and then the team just does laps around the enemy. And finally, Skogul, Chloe, and 2A Kali. This team is just impending damage. You can also use Kali's leader skill if you need the additional crit rate. And that's everything for the list. If you guys have a farmable Guild War offense that you want to share, leave it in a comment below. And I didn't write an outro, so I'll just see you guys next time. Later.